Welcome to another video in this series, how to build your own language learning application with Java and Spring Boot, and also Google Translate. So in some cases, when you are working with data, you might have audio, such as this. I'm going to play it. I'm not going to attempt to repeat it, but it's German. And you may want to know what the sentence means in English. So your data, for example, from Mozilla Common Voice, has audio and a text transcript. So in my case, I have a very simple language learning application. This is just the results of a previous session. We're not playing it live. So yeah, so Pete used to be mined here. So that gives you an idea of the vocabulary, what the whole sentence means, and so on. So how do you incorporate Google Translate API into your application? I assume that you have IntelliJ already on your computer, or Eclipse, or a suitable IDE, and you're familiar with Java and Spring Boot. So then the first thing to be concerned about is, how do I get credentials to call this Google Translate API? This bean translate provided by Google requires Google credentials. And these Google credentials are actually, they're basically created from a JSON configuration, which I have as a resource in my application. I'm not too concerned about security. I'm running the application locally, and maybe this key is already canceled. So if you were to see it or lift it from the screen, it wouldn't be a major security breach. Very well. So let's go to the Google console. Close this and keys. It's going to delete this. We're just going to walk backwards through the steps, actually. And what is foo? Foo is a service account. And service accounts, foo, we're just going to delete it. This is kind of a unintentional behind the scenes look, but I don't think it's so bad. So actions, delete. So I'm tearing down the results of a previous recording. I assume you have an account at Google that is a Google Cloud account, and that you have created a project, or that you have the ability to create a project. So I'm working with this project, and I'm going to look at APIs and services. You need to enable the Google Translate API. Okay, and this Google Cloud console is somewhat slow. So a lot of the video is going to be spent waiting for it, unfortunately. Yeah, and it could be that my computer is also slow, or my internet connection's not great, but I'm going to go to Translate. And we search for that, and we might have it enabled. So I might have to tear down some previous work. There usually is an enable button right there. So I'm just going to disable, and we'll get a message about, yeah, I do want to disable it. Disable. This will take a second or so. So just to recap, I've torn down the service account associated with the JSON credentials file. I've disabled the Translate API. So you might guess, what will we do? Well, I'm going to go back, but we will click that enable. And back again. Okay. Enabled APIs and services. enable APIs and services. This is fairly straightforward, and there's existing documentation on this, but it's not entirely easy to develop the muscle memory to just navigate in the console, unless you do this on a daily basis. It's part of your profession. We found Cloud Translation API, we selected it, and are we going to try it? Well, why not try it? Not sure how to start exploring. Not too much to do. Documentation support. We're not too concerned. We have an idea of what Google Translate does from our experience on the web. The Cloud API does a bit more. It's more powerful. We clicked enable. Now we're waiting for that request to complete. Okay, so for our project, we've enabled Google Translate API. Now we can't start playing until we have credentials. And we need to associate the credentials with a service account. So create credentials. I have three choices. The right one is service account. And what do we call it? I called it foo last time. We'll just call it bar. And we're just going to click done. I'm not going to read the instructions. So we have the service account. Are we done? Almost. We need to create or generate that JSON file for bar. So details, permissions, keys. So go to the keys tab and add a key. Create a new key. Private key saved. So I'm going to say this again. Tokyo Hall is the name of this project. Okay. And yeah, so right here, here's the JSON. Don't look too closely at the secret key. Doesn't really matter. Yeah, so resources, new file, Google Cloud credentials. And that's probably a too general name for this. These credentials might just be for that one API, Google Translate. So this is almost about it. Now, what I would do, or what I did in my application, is I create a bean for Google Cloud credentials, and I'll just say 4 in this case. And yeah, in not so plain English, basically load that file, stream it into an input stream, and let the factory on Google Credentials take care of the rest. And we had this bean, Google Credentials. Why? Because the bean that we really care about, Translate, which we'll wrap in our translation service, requires Google Credentials. And just in case you choose a different translation solution in the future, I'm actually wrapping the Translate in a service that implements an interface. So Translation Service Google. I actually have 2 implementations, Translation Service Google and Translation Service NoOp. I use NoOp in the case that I'm learning language offline. For example, I'm in an airplane or I'm in an area where I have a bad internet connection. So Google, right. So Translation Service Google, in turn, depends on this being Translate. And all I care about is, okay, translate, say, from Spanish, this transcript, Hola Mundo, and it's just hard-coded to translate. Actually, not there. There's a little sophistication here because of timeouts, but basically hard-coded to translate into English. So if I go back to Chrome, into my application, you can see the previous results. This is a replay of a session in German, so I'll click Next to look at the next mistake. So in this case, I was almost correct. You see one of the fundamental building blocks of your language learning application is also a diff to test how well you have transcribed the audio. I'm not sure if you heard that clearly, but in this language learning application, when we return to it, we'll see that you listen and you transcribe. This is just a review of a session. Now, if I want to know what that sentence in German meant, perhaps to remember it better, learn the meaning of some of the words, not just the sounds. Sounds are important, though. Probably more important than the meaning. So I can click the translate button. I glared at the person opposite for a moment, then tucked the delivery under my arm and left the store. That's the machine translation. So I can toggle it just like that. So we'll go back to IntelliJ, and yeah, that's really about it. If I were to restart the application, I'm now using Google Cloud Credentials 4. I think it's going to work, but just in case we're not 100% sure, we'll test the work that's been done in this recording so far. This is being recorded on a MacBook Air, which doesn't have, that much or the greatest system resources. So probably could use some more memory. So we're starting. As you can see from the log in IntelliJ, the basic Spring Boot application, called it Site Dictation. It's a website where you play dictation exercises. For the most part, right now, it's just an app that I use locally. Don't actually deploy it anywhere in the cloud. But okay, so started dictation app, 45 seconds. And yeah, we're just going to review the same previous session. And hopefully, okay, so I made another mistake here. The review of the session, you can see replay and the path. If I hit translate, okay, yeah, it worked. I'm using Google Cloud Credentials 4, and she had blue eyes with dark eyeliner. And the audio comes from Common Voice. I'm not sure if it's audible, so I'm not going to replay it. And that's about it. We're going to return to this, I guess, this theme of incorporating Google Translate as a building block for a language learning application in a future video. So for now, I would say it's useful to have, but it's not essential, in my opinion, for actually making great progress in a language. And that's about it. If you dislike it, click dislike.